Welcome to our third Rangers Roundup podcast, which is where we use the international breaks to review the progress or lack of made so far this season. We briefly look forward also to games coming up and discuss any club news. Hopefully, we're going to be joined later on by Matt, who's normally along with us for these. And after our last threesome, we asked Joe to return and hopefully offer a wider perspective in regard to the players. Welcome to you, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
As I
Pleasure
say,
as
we're
always.
waiting for Matt to join us, but we want to keep going. Let's start by recapping the matches played since the last time that we had the Rangers roundup. And that starts off with QPR against Portsmouth. That was on 19th of October. Then we played Coventry, Burnley, Sunderland, Middlesbrough, and then Leeds. And we lost against Portsmouth, real shame. Coventry drew 1-1. Burnley, it was a 0-0. QPR Sunderland 0-0. You can see a trend developing here. And then suddenly, QPR against Middlesbrough, we lost that one 4-1. And we followed that up with a 2-0 loss against Leeds on Saturday, the 9th of November. These results translate into only 3 points out of a possible 18. So it's no surprise that we're sitting 24th on 10 points in the championship. So let's leave the details and possible solutions to discuss later, as well as discussing the summer transfers for now. Instead, we'll focus upon reviewing QPR's performance, really. So I think I better turn to you now first, Joe, because Matt's not here. So these performances, were they what you expected? I presume they're not. Are we in the midst of a crisis, perhaps?
We're definitely in the midst of a crisis. There's not many teams across the divisions that I don't think are as bad as us. And looking at what I've seen in the championship so far this season, we're comfortably the worst team in the league. Um, Performance-wise, there were signs of hope against Burnley in that we showed our capacity to be able to defend and get out a clean sheet. However, I will caveat that with the fact that Burnley have had a few 0-0 draws at home this season, and it goes to the point I made during the last Rangers roundup that Burnley don't have a centre forward, and that is going to come back to bite them, I think. The performances against Coventry, at least in the second half, there was a sign of life. The first half against Sunderland showed that, if we play on the front foot, we can have cause teams problems. You think of the number of saves that were made in that game and as well in the Middlesbrough game. But the
Yeah.
Middlesbrough game itself was dire. It's difficult for me to decide whether the Middlesbrough performance or the Portsmouth performance is as bad as I've seen us. And I think it's the Portsmouth one because of the gravity of that game and the fact that Portsmouth are down towards the bottom with us. And when I went to the game, I saw the team sheet and thought, okay, he has gone to a back three. There is promise there. But then when he actually set up at the start of the game with a four, it looked baffling because in a past life, I was a season ticket holder at Charlton for a season. I've got friends and family that are big Charlton fans. So I used to go with them when I was a kid. And I've seen Morgan Fox play ever since he first came through. And he's never been quick enough to be a centre back in a two or a left back in a four. So the
Yeah.
decision to play him in that, was damaging. And in fairness to him, that he put in one of the worst performances I think many of us have seen in a Rangers shirt for a long time. Now, whether that's because he's come back too early, I think the fact he's dropped completely out of the squad ever since suggests that perhaps it was too early for him to come in. But nevertheless, it's going to be one of those performances that we're still talking about in 20, 30 years' time.
Yeah, I think you'd be hard pushed to find anyone now on the terraces with a glass half full mentality. Injuries and suspensions have decimated any attempt by Marti to develop a consistent team selection, and it is bad. That said, after disappointing performances against Coventry and Portsmouth, we achieved two excellent draws against two top sides. those performances showed teamwork and intensity, and morale was raised as we looked towards our first home win against Borough. Instead, we saw effectively the same side flounder, with the midfield trio in particular no longer working together to regain or keep the ball. And the less said about the goal chances, the better. Um, I do think, though, that Leeds was more of a far better side, beating a side low in the confidence and having players having to fill unusual roles. I mean, I agree with you actually in what you were saying. I think the Portsmouth match showed probably us at our worst. That really was poor. Leeds, I expect Leeds to be up there. I expect them to be promoted, to be quite honest. Um,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Sunderland, I think probably a good second, and I think
Uh,
Middlesbrough in the top six.
I've seen Middlesbrough twice this season. I saw them in the game at Loftus Road, and actually, I saw a reserve team beat Leeds in the cup earlier on in the season. And Middlesbrough's depth is absolutely fantastic. I would actually go so far as to say of the teams that I've seen this season, Leeds and Middlesbrough are the best two.
Okay.
But Middlesbrough have got a consistency issue that doesn't seem to trouble the likes of Leeds. But the fact that Middlesbrough have got goals in their team from various areas, and they've got Doak on one side, and then supplement him with, say, Isaiah Jones on the other, they've got attacking prowess that suggests they're going to go far this season. I would actually say about the Sunderland result, I think on paper, the Sunderland result looks a good result because it's a 0-0 draw with a team at the top of the division. However, I think in the context of the game, the fact that you play half an hour against 10 men, I actually think that's a bit of a worrying sign because it's the second time this season we've had to play against 10 men and we've been unable to score a goal against them.
Yeah, I think
Again,
that's almost a separate issue. The fact that we can't put
yeah,
the anyone, we just don't have.
them, no, don't have anyone, and that's been evident ever since pre-season, and it seems bizarre that the recruitment hasn't highlighted it. You know,
Yeah,
I can't think of many successful championship teams that have gone into a season with two centre forwards. But when I was a kid and when you were younger, your teams used to go into seasons with four. The debate would be whether teams go with four or five strikers in their squad. To go with two is just it's bizarre.
yeah. So I guess I've got to ask you this: given the run that we've had, and it's been really poor. It really
Mm.
has been. I mean, poor in terms of consistency more than anything else. Um, I accept we've got problems with injuries. There's no doubt that we've got square pegs playing in round holes. I do, and then that is a problem. You've only got to look at the lineups to see that. But what is the identifiable reason for you or reasons for our troubles?
Well, I think it's threefold. I think primarily the recruitment has been terrible. Um, there's an excess of players who either don't fit the system or the system doesn't fit them. I think of Sella, Madsen, in particular, even Santos. It doesn't a 4-2-3-1 doesn't suit Santos either. Arguably doesn't suit Dembele either, unless he's played as a 10. So I
Mm.
think that's a big problem. The notion that your head of recruitment and your CEO don't have enough intelligence between them to realise that we're going with one left back who the club don't even want, three right backs, which suggests either a lack of confidence in your first and second choice, which would have been Dunn and Santos to get Ashby in late, or a complete misunderstanding of what the squad is exists to do. Even at centre half, you look at the fact that we've had to play Samfield at centre half. Jake Clark-Salter's known injuries have been known ever since he come to the club. The club could have gone in for someone. There's a Surinamese player at Hammarby called Shaquille Penis. He's a very good left-sided player. He's quite athletic. He would have done as cover because he can play left back as well. Zach Williams at Crewe, for example, if you're going for a really younger player, Williams will probably eventually play for Wales. Crew's always a sound grounding in terms of being able to play with the ball at your feet. So he could have done, even if they'd got an emergency left back on loan. I mean, so the recruitment itself it just doesn't work. It's squares and triangles that don't fit each other, and it's a mess. So you end up with this kaleidoscope team that doesn't produce any sound pictures. Secondly, I do think the manager does need to cop some blame as well. I think there are times this season where tactically we've looked inept.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not going to argue with
his
that.
his ability to devise a team that can just sit in and keep the game safe for 20, 30 minutes is not there. And equally, there are moments this season where his substitutions have looked bizarre. And the Coventry game to me stands out because Paul Smith was the best player on the pitch the second half.
Took him off.
Um, and they took him off. And our attack lost complete momentum in that. And the game almost swung back to Coventry. We're reliant on the goalkeeper to make late saves again. Equally, I think that knowing that there are players who are injured, that there are gaps in the squad. We do have a development squad that is quite sizable. You could supplement players into there. For example, they could have brought Casey Shan in for the Leeds game just as a substitute, just at least then you've got another body and another option. But there's been a reluctance, aside from Kieran Morgan, to introduce players from that development setup. Now, the argument can be that these players aren't ready to play championship football. But with Morgan wasn't even deemed ready to go on the preseason tour.
No,
So you can chuck players in and they can survive. And Marty could help himself out a little bit more in that regard. He's been like it since he came in. He has this desire to play as many number 10s as he wants, but I don't think it works. I actually think you can get away with one number 10 playing wide and coming in. Probably on our side, it has to be from the left-hand side because that's where you've got a fullback that will overlap and you can retain the width for the team. But I don't think playing Chair and Dembele works together. Too many
no.
lightweight players on the football pitch. So I do think he needs to cop some blame. And then the third point is obviously the injuries. You know, the stats are there for everyone to see about Clark, Salter, and Colback. I don't need to reiterate them. We've done it before. That other areas have done that as well. So they're known too. But like I say, it's a sports team. Players get injured. You know, we go back then full circle to recruitment. The recruitment should be aware that there are players in the team that get injured, and you beef the squad up around those players to ensure that if they do fall to injury, which they will at some point, that there's enough cover to, keep the team competitive.
Yeah, and I think that really is the nub of it all. We have got an injury crisis, no doubt at all about it. I mean, you've got Clark Salter out, Colback, Chair, Dembele, Parle, Morrison, Frey, and of course Fox still.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a lot in one go. But I agree with you. If you've got depth, quality and depth, then you don't have quite the problem that we've got. Instead, as you say, the only other striker we've got after Frey went down is Seller. And for left back, after Parle went off, who was there to replace him? Oh, well, Sam Field can always do that. No, Sam Field's busy elsewhere. It just got crazy, I think, really, really was. So I agree with you on that. It's the lack of depth that's killing us. I think as much as anything else, it just shows you how dependent we are on key players such as Parle, Chair, and Frey. So I don't know. Do you feel that the problems that we're enduring can be laid at the feet of Marti Cifuentes only, or do you think it's shared?
No, I think it is shared. I think the balance probably leans slightly more towards Belk and Nuri. I mean, you
Okay.
could be generous. You could be generous to Nuri and turn around and say, well, he's never held a position of this significance before. He's 27 years old.
Mm,
But there are plenty of analysts across multiple clubs who are younger than Nuri who probably have a better idea of recruitment than he does. But so, it's you can throw criticism at him, and I do think that if you do, mud will stick to him. There are lots of criticisms of Belk online, and the fact that this is not the first time that he's recruited heavily from abroad and we've ended up in this situation implies that he doesn't learn his lesson. Also, he's been in the position for quite a long time, which normally, if you're ahead of recruitment and you're doing pretty well, bigger suitors come calling for you. The fact that no one seems to have, well, from what we know at least, suggests that maybe he's not as fantastic at his job as some within the club seem to believe. But yeah, I think Marti, say if we're doing a balance thing, I think probably it's 60-40, 70-30 in terms of the hierarchy, then the manager. But then the manager does, like we mentioned before, with his tactical decisions and his substitutions, particularly. I do think he does need to take some responsibility for the performances we've seen.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think Marty, you have to expect him to have make mistakes, in selecting players to start or in terms of substitutions, and he has to accept the responsibility for that. Uh, I do feel though that he started this season without the cover that he surely must have demanded. Um, it's lucky that Morgan has emerged as a player who's largely capable of filling Jack Colback's position. And sometimes without Sam Field alongside him for assistance either, I might add. But playing a rushback Fox, as you said earlier on, at left back, or two right backs, just shows how crazy things are at the moment. It really does.
Yeah.
Okay, we're a good way through the season, so perhaps this is a good time to move on and rate those summer transfers that we had into the club. London World newspaper were nice enough to do this for us, so we looked at those. If I go through all these, then perhaps we can discuss them at leisure. Nicholas Madsen was given a 4 out of 10.
I think that's generous.
Yeah, frankly, so do I, because then Zancella has got 2 out of 10, and I think that was a bit harsh. Jonathan Varane got 7 out of 10.
I think that's generous as well. I know he's shown a bit. I know he's improved in the last sort of 2 or 3 games, but I'm still not convinced on him. I actually think maybe he's a centre half.
Okay,
he might not be.
Looking at this, Madsen cost us reportedly 2 million, Zancella 1.7, and Jonathan Varane only 875,000. So he's actually looking like a better deal, quite honestly, which says a lot. But Daniel Benny, they've rated him at 6 out of 10, which I think is a bit unfair because the lad is, I'm sure he was meant for next season, not this season.
Yeah.
He's been thrown in, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Paul Nardi, they've only given him a 7 out of 10. I probably would have given him a higher one than that. He's done some fantastic saves. Tactically, I don't think he's made many mistakes, to be honest.
No, he does worry me though. The fact is he doesn't come for crosses. The fact that any time a corner goes in, we look like we're going to concede. And also, actually, weirdly, when he plays loft end, he has this almost like this inability to give the ball to Jimmy Dunn. He can't throw the ball out to him. He can't kick the ball out to him. We always end up going down this same path. Or the ball goes to Cook, and Cook doesn't play a pass into midfield, and it's.
I think it's some sort of magnetism or something. That's it.
It's something bizarre going on.
Yeah, you're right though. And then Santos, he's given a 3 out of 10 by them. He has struggled with his physicality. You alluded to it earlier on. Absolutely right. I agree with that. He could be better, for definite. Liam Morrison given 5 out of 10. And I actually thought when he was fit, he was pretty good.
Yeah.
More than that, I won't say. So I don't know how he got 5 out of 10. Sato got a 7 out of 10. And I can see why, because they've seen him at work and they appreciate how he does. And for a slight guy, he holds onto the ball pretty well, I thought. And then Ashby is given a 6 out of 10. His defensive work's been equally very similar to Santos in a lot of ways. But actually, I thought he was very good against Sunderland. But now he's out with a hamstring injury.
Yeah.
And that brings us round to the last one, Dembele, who was given an 8 out of 10 because he was the creative source for us when Chair was injured, and now both he and Chair are injured. So
I think that 8's a little bit generous as well.
Oh, you've been very hard today.
Yeah, there's a lot of Dembele's game to like. and he gets the ball in the half turn, the fact he can carry it, his brain, particularly when he has the ball in attacking areas, is more advanced than probably anyone else in the team. But once the ball goes beyond the halfway line, he's a no-show. And what frustrates me as well, and particularly the bloke Les that sits next to me, is that Dembele doesn't come and show for the ball off the centre backs or the midfielders. He just sort of walks in these pockets and doesn't move for it, and it's causing us problems advancing up the pitch. It's causing us problems retaining the ball. But like I say, he gets a goal and 3 assists, and I suppose people will argue that's what he's there to do in the team. But I personally think
He could do more.
I actually think he's potentially causing more problems in terms of on the pitch, in terms of balance than is necessarily given credit for. I just want to add on Santos as well that a Brazilian from a mid-table Portuguese league at right back always looks a bit worrying coming into a team in a league as physical as this. And actually, it would have made more sense for the club to have kept Larkesh and loaned Santos out for 6 months, for 9 months, for a season, just so he has a year where physically he's getting up to pace with English football. That wouldn't have hurt him. It would have meant he'd have been a project player for the future. But I mean, throwing a guy in who doesn't look like he's ever shoulder barged a player, doesn't ever look like he's had to put up with big athletic footballers, it's just worrying.
Yeah, I will quickly mention that Ziad Lakash has just done his hamstring. So
Yeah,
I just thought I'd add that one in. Must be all
yeah,
that
exactly.
there.
That's a
Uh,
shame because he's had a good start at Dundee.
no. Um, I would add that I've been surprised at how long it's taken Dembele, Santos, Varane, and Sato to adapt to the championship's physicality. And I really did wonder if the club could have done a lot more to accelerate that conditioning that they obviously needed to do. They look for so many games light, they really
Mm.
did. Anyway,
Saito though has the tenacity that the others don't when he's off the ball.
yes,
And I think of the signings, he's been the most impressive. I never saw him playing left back and thought that was going to be something that would work. Never thought I'd see him as a wing back and thought something that could work. But he's got a tenacity and a brain that as well that implies that there is more to come from him. So he's been an impressive signing. But again, he's a loan signing. He'll disappear again in the summer, and
yeah.
we've got no value.
Okay, so looking back at the ones that we got in the summer, Joe, do you think that we got the right players to complement Marty's style of play, whatever that is? I'm not quite sure.
That's a tough question. Um, if he wanted to play 4-3-3 like he had at Hammarby, then no,
Hmm.
because there's not enough energy in the midfield to play either side of the deepest player. In terms of pace, no, but then he doesn't really play with a lot of pace at Hammarby, particularly. Like they had a Montenegrin winger that was probably the only natural wide player that they had. Everyone else was number tens. And like I say, we've seen in his games that he prefers to play with number tens that keep the ball, that are more technical than necessarily athletic players like Paul Smith. I wonder as well whether the centre forward situation, he's quite happy with what he got there. Like Seller and Frey, they're not the same player. Not just in terms of output, but in terms of what they can do.
Yeah,
Um, and I'd throw Dykes in that. Like if you even with Dykes as well, Dykes is different to them as well. So it's a bit odd in that sense that there's no matchup in terms of there. Um, and then think about what style does he want to play. Well, if he wants to play with the ball on the floor, not getting a right back that is more comfortable than Jimmy Dunn with the ball is maybe something as well that suggests that he hasn't. But I'd probably lean towards the fact that he hasn't got the players to fit his system, um, which makes you wonder whether he's actually privy to any of the recruitment conversations whatsoever. But in
yeah,
terms of whether we've got the right players in terms of decent, sturdy footballers who can be trusted on the pitch, then the answer there is quite evidently no.
yeah. And I'm with you on this. I don't think he has enough players to provide quality and depth, the ones that we need to keep us in. I mean, I just look at the rotation that was done by Leeds, for example, in the
Mm.
last one. I mean, everybody who came on was as good as the other or better.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so is it a question that we couldn't afford it? Is that what we're talking about?
I think that's probably the angle that they're gonna um pursue with in the press, if and when they do speak, because obviously they don't speak a lot now. Um, I do think it will get thrown back in our faces. The transfers in January, you will hear the club come out and say, "Oh no, we can't sign players due to potential breaches of FFP." Which, you're a CEO, you know that this exists. You need to be more prudent with the way you spend money. You know that FFP is simply a guideline. It's not this big restrainer or destabilizer that I think too many clubs believe it is. It's just a guideline. Just operate within it. It's pretty simple, and so many CEOs don't seem to be able to do it. I actually think I wonder as well whether some of it is to do with the fact that the new CEO has come in and he's decided that he wants to catch people's eye with sign-ins. So rather than look at more trusted leagues, rather than also looking at divisions below the championship, which, if you sign a player from, let's say, there's a player I like who plays for Barrow, for example, called Dean Campbell. I think he's quite a solid player, could play further up the divisions. Um, if you go and sign him, it's not as exciting to the fans as if you go and sign a French boat that plays in Spain, in the case of Varane, or a Danish guy who scored 12 goals in the Belgian league. So I do wonder whether some of that is he wants to keep fans on side. So I will give you something that will get your attention and will excite you, and will keep there was this Messiah complex around him, particularly from the fans, that we've got this young, exciting CEO. He's not Lee Hoos. He's fantastic. Whether he felt as if that image had to be retained, I don't know.
It could be. Right, we're gonna run out of time soon, so really need to.
Sorry.
No, it's good stuff. Um, let's move on to the last subject. In the next couple of weeks, we're playing Stoke and Cardiff. Whilst no championship fixtures should be regarded as easy, are these mid-table opponents better for QPR, do you reckon, Joe?
You would think so. You would think that the run of games from now until the new year allows us to get more points on the board. However, as you've seen, if we cannot get players back from injury, we're already going to be looking towards January before we're getting significant results. It may well be that we may well come back to look upon the first 2 or 3 phases of the season as actually having quite difficult fixtures. I think of a case like Millwall. I don't think people have ever given Millwall the kind of respect that they deserve as a footballing team now, because Harris has moved them away from the big lumps towards actual dynamic footballers. And we may well be looking at them and thinking, actually, they were games we were never going to win in the first place. Um, the next 2 in particular are vital, Stoke and Cardiff. You can get 4 or 6 points out of there, then at least we're showing life. We have to stop beating the teams around us. We've already played Portsmouth and Plymouth at home, and we've got 1 point from the 2. So we have to win these games. As simple as that. And I think if he loses the next,
them, I think that's it. I
yeah, I
hate
think so too.
Marti to be gone, and I
I
don't.
did, I did think, I did think he would be given till January because I thought the board and him were on side. However, the murmurs that we've seen regarding a potential new manager today and yesterday implies that may not be the case. So time is working against him, as it
Yeah,
is us.
I agree, and that's a really doom and gloom type thing to finish on. But our time is well and truly up for this third Rangers roundup. So I'd like to quickly thank Joe, and apologies for Matt for missing you out, our editor James, and all of you for watching. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, please do click on subscribe and also perhaps add a comment or two below. We'll be back for another Rangers roundup later in the season when there's another international break of some sort. Hopefully, we'll be discussing wins and Marty's success in turning this tanker around. Meanwhile, look out for all our regular preview podcasts before each fixture and specials when we chat to players or others at the club or when we ask fans questions. I'm Brian Fisher, and this has been another Hoops and Dreams QPR podcast. Come on, you R's!